Thank you. Thank you, Pier Giorgio. So I'm very delighted to be here with you this afternoon. And I try to keep my presentation as short as possible. The title of my presentation is Tax Governance and BEPS Issues. What will the post-BEPS tax world look like? That's a very ambitious title. The purpose here is not obviously to go very deep into each BEPS action, but to give you, I would say, an overview of the connections between a good tax governance on the one side, and especially good tax governance within groups, within companies, and the BEPS issues on the other side. And we'll see that there are many interactions between the two. So as an introduction, I will try to briefly explain what BEPS and good tax governance consists of, meaning clarifying what we are talking about. Afterwards, we'll see that tax governance and BEPS actually have common goals, but also interacted each other. And also we will take a brief word on their main risks. I would say the main risks covered by good tax governance and BEPS issues and actions as reported at the OECD. And as I will give you as an example, a brief example of the BEPS application in an international context, so talking about a tax treaty that has recently been signed between France and Colombia, and afterwards a few words of conclusion. So BEPS, as you probably know, that's an acronym, and it means base erosion and profit shifting. And that's the OECD General Secretary Angel Gurria, who defined what BEPS is. And BEPS aims at constituting the building blocks for an internationally agreed and coordinated response to corporate tax planning strategies that exploit the gaps and loopholes of the current tax systems artificially, and that's a key word, artificially, artificially shift profits to locations where they are subject to more favorable tax treatment. Just to give you a brief overview of the findings. So the findings of the work performed since 2013 highlight the magnitude of the issue, because global CIT revenue losses are estimated between 4 and 10% of global CIT revenues, and that represents between 100 and 240 billion US dollars per year. So that's why, obviously, it's a key challenge and a key issue, even at OECD level, to tackle erosion and profit shifting. And obviously, the ultimate purpose is not to prevent Euro companies from doing business. The ultimate purpose is to align taxation of the profits with, first, economic substance, and second, value creation. In other words, so enterprises must be taxed where they make business and profits, and therefore where they eventually create value. So that's the key message of the BEPS action plan. And that's also what innovation means for governments and their tax administration in the international tax field today. Tax governance for businesses, so that's a definition given by the former head of tax at Standard Bank Group, and that meaning that tax governance for businesses, this means the process of steering and guiding a corporate group in relation to its taxation responsibilities, embracing all taxes affecting the group and all the rights, but also responsibilities, risks in relation to these taxes. But good tax governance, and that's also very important, good tax governance requires clear, stable, and reasonable tax guidelines given by the tax authorities, in particular in the international tax field. And that's why good tax governance for tax administration, on the other side, is first to making sure that the local and global tax environment creates and preserves a business-friendly tax systems, promotes growth-friendly taxation, and actually tackles tax evasion and aggressive tax planning. So what are the common goals of good tax governance and BEPS? The first one is clearly to restore the public trust in the domestic and international tax systems. The tax systems should be designed in the future in such a way that they should no longer be at the top of the headlines. You know, that's, I would say, a key point. The second point is that another common goal is to provide greater certainty to the business community, meaning to Euro companies, to Euro businesses, and also to provide more consistency between tax policies from one country to the other. Meaning that this consistency, that is the main objective to be reached to reduce opportunities for purely tax-driven operations and transactions. And let's have a dream. At least that's what the many governments can say. Let's have the dream is, and the ultimate goal could be to reach harmonized tax systems all over the world. I believe this would remain a dream and will remain a dream for many, many years. But that's obviously, ideally, I would say, the ultimate goal. Another one is to reduce, and that's probably more realistic, to reduce unfair tax competition among the states, but also between companies. Among the states, for example, getting rid of harmful tax rules and tax regimes, but also between companies, because obviously M&Es adopting aggressive tax policies and having the means to do so have and can get a big advantage compared to medium-sized companies which have not the means to actually benefit from the favorable tax rules and tax loopholes that exist. And the final goal that we can find is also to improve the warranties given to taxpayers and investors, meaning that's obviously a key point for them to rely on a business-friendly, a predictable tax environment. And this is also what BEPS should mean for the business community. And obviously, that's a very important message to pass on, even at OECD level. And that's what we've tried to do at our level, but I believe really that's a key message as well. Talking about interactions between tax governance and BEPS, no. First of all, we're talking about enhancing transparency. And we have already talked transparency, talking about ethics, but that's already true in the tax field, and especially in the international tax field. And also enhancing exchange of information between tax administrations without breaking the minimum level of confidentiality. And here we are talking about Action 5 of the BEPS plan. Action 5 is countering harmful tax practices. We are talking about Action 12, meaning requiring taxpayers to disclose their aggressive tax schemes to tax administrations. And we're also talking about Action 13, meaning re-examining the transfer pricing documentation, and in particular adopting what you've probably heard about and what is called the country-by-country reporting. A second interaction is to ensure that profit sharing within groups fits with the underlying substance and business rationale. Substance and business rationale, two other key words in the future international tax field. And for example, we can have a look at Action 3, Action 3 about CFC, meaning controlled foreign companies rules. But that's only true talking about Action 5. Well, Action 6 is preventing the tax abuse, the tax treaty abuse, especially focusing on treaty shopping. And one of the main recommendations, without entering into too many details, but one of the main recommendations is to insert in all double tax treaty what we call a principal purpose test clause. A principal purpose test clause is that to benefit from the provisions of a given tax treaty between two countries, a transaction, an operation under review must not be purely tax-driven or even having one of its principal objectives that is tax-oriented. And also, we're talking also about Action 7, which is preventing artificial avoidance of permanent establishment status, and especially, I would say, reviewing and modifying what is meant by the term preparatory activities. Another interaction is about reducing, obviously, double taxation as well as double non-taxation. And obviously, talking about the BEPS action plan, we are first talking about reducing double non-taxation, meaning closing tax loopholes in particular. And that's specifically the case when you look at the report on Action 2, which is neutralizing the effects of hybrid mismatch arrangements. But also on Action 3, which is limiting base erosion through interest deduction. A fourth interaction we can see is to avoid artificial profit shifting in low-tax jurisdictions through inappropriate transfer pricing policies. And so meaning here we are focusing on transfer pricing. And as you know, that's a major challenge and issue in the international groups and the MNEs for many years now. But it becomes more and more pregnant, I would say, and especially that is the BEPS action plan is designed to carefully, I would say, to set clear limits on practices that can be discussed or even questioned in this specific field. So here we are talking about what? We're talking about intangibles, so transfer pricing rules on intangibles. and especially on hard-to-value intangibles. We're talking also about cost contribution arrangements within, obviously, a given international groups. And we're talking, another example, on low-value adding intra-group services. So all these areas are now, I would say, are now under review, and there are recommendations coming from the OECD to restrict the usual and current practices on all these specific topics. And the last interaction, and which is also important, is to improve resolution of tax disputes between states on the global side and between a given state and its resident taxpayers on local side. And here we're talking about Action 14, in particular, 14, which sets dispute resolution mechanism to make sure that the enterprise cross-border disputes can be resolved in a reasonable time frame. So, and that's, I would say, a very important need for you and your companies to get warranties from your tax administration or from the tax administration, the countries where you have subsidiaries, that tax disputes between two different states, to know which of them has the right to tax you in its own country, such kind of disputes must be resolved in a reasonable time frame. And that's obviously what the recommendations on Action 14 say. Yeah. Just a few words on the main risks now. The first one is the implication on the non-OECD countries. That's a big challenge. So as Pier Giorgio just told you, there were regional network meetings on the BEPS action plan, so organized in Asia, in Latin America. But obviously, it is a big challenge for the OECD countries to convince developing countries to adhere, let's say, to this BEPS action plan, because otherwise we will have two different blocks in the world, one of them adopting such measures, but the other one still remaining behind, I would say, and just waiting for the outcome of these measures in the other countries. That's, I believe, not acceptable, and that would not work. So that's why it is a threat and it is a risk. The other one is even within, I would say, and between OECD countries, it's an unbalanced application of the BEPS package, meaning that we can see different levels of involvement, so creating potential distortions in tax competitiveness, and that's very important. And impacting growth in the countries, taking the lead, I would say, negatively, meaning the countries being the pioneers, I would say, in implementing so the BEPS tax package measures. And on the other side, they will only have countries not implementing such measures. And obviously, that could create very big and heavy distortions between the tax environments in these different countries. And if there's no minimum consensus, so between both on the principles and the main solutions and the implementation tools, the question is to know whether there's a risk of do-nothing outcome of this BEPS action plan. Because for the timing, we're only talking about recommendations. The point is to know whether these recommendations will actually have concrete effects, and especially when we'll see many countries modifying their domestic tax legislation to take into account these recommendations.
Okay.
So perhaps, yes, I will skip, yes, the example. So we can talk about that, yes, later, perhaps with other questions. And just as a conclusion, very quickly, so BEPS action plan. So there was a strong political will throughout the OECD member states at the beginning, but which is still to be shared by many developing countries. And the concrete outcome is still to be clarified, as we've just said. So, but this, and that's important for you and the way you manage your business, because this should nevertheless give rise to significant changes of the international tax rules over the at least over the mid and long term, and becoming a very powerful tool in the hands of the tax authorities to tackle base erosion and profit shifting. But this gives you, as CFOs and as managers of your companies, a big opportunity to improve your tax policy and your tax governance within your own structures.
Thank you.